I handed him a pregnancy test with the words pregnant on it. And he just frowned and said, "Get rid of it. It's the wrong time." What would you do? I stood there in that all too familiar kitchen, my hands shaking, watching the man I'd loved for 4 years coldly turn back to his phone screen. And his mother? She sipped her coffee and said, "Finally, my son sees it. You're not smart, not pretty, just a burden with a baby." That was the moment I walked out of that house, with nothing but my phone, my wallet, and a child growing inside me. No home, no family, no one on my side. And this is how I survived, gave birth, and found myself again. I used to think I truly knew the man I loved. 4 years together, not without ups and downs, but I believed our love was enough to get us through the arguments about his mother, the woman who never once accepted me, enough to overlook all the times he said, "She's just worried about me, you should understand." And most of all, I believed that love was enough to welcome something miraculous together, a child, even if it came at the wrong time. When the pregnancy test spelled out pregnant, loud and clear, I didn't panic the way I thought I would. There was a flicker of fear, of course, but the stronger feeling was hope. We weren't that young anymore. We had a cozy apartment, stable incomes, and we had joked half seriously about having kids someday after dinner. I thought if I told him the right way, he would hold me. Maybe he'd be shocked at first, but then he'd smile and say, "We'll be okay." So I planned to tell him on Saturday morning. I made his favorite meal, perfectly cooked eggs, spicy butter sauce, thin avocado slices laid carefully on toasted bread. I got up early, prepared everything meticulously, turning our little kitchen into what looked like a high-end brunch restaurant. I told myself, just make it gentle, like any other morning. Then tell him, and we'll face it together. But what I didn't expect, like so many times before, was the sudden, unwelcome appearance of Barb, his mother. She walked in like the apartment belonged to her, using the spare key he once told me he barely used. A small detail, but now I see it clearly. That key wasn't just to the apartment, it was her key to controlling his life. She said she was just dropping by, just wanted to sit for a cup of coffee. I forced a smile, trying to stay calm even though I wanted to scream. Eric, as usual, kissed my cheek like a robot, then sat down with her eyes glued to his phone, never once looking at the meal I'd so carefully prepared. And me, still holding a towel with a bit of avocado butter on it, stood there, swallowing hard as the morning sickness crept up my throat. But this time, it wasn't just the pregnancy, it was the gut feeling that I was about to step into a moment that would change my life forever. And then I said it. No build-up, no explanations. I pulled out the test and simply said, "I have something to tell you." Eric looked up. His face, I'll never forget it. Not surprised, not emotional, just annoyed. As if I had interrupted an important meeting. And then he said 4 words. 4 words that buried every hope, every beautiful memory I thought we had. Abortions are quick. Bad timing. I went numb. No questions. No holding my hand. No words of comfort. And worse, Barb, sipping her coffee calmly, smirked and said, "Finally, my son sees you for what you are. Not beautiful, not smart, just a burden with a belly." 4 years together. 4 years of trying to please her. Birthday gifts, small talk about her job, listening to her boring stories, forcing myself to cook her way, even though I hated it. All for that sneer. I gently placed the pregnancy test on the table, wiped my hands on the kitchen towel out of sheer habit, walked into the bathroom and washed my face for what felt like forever, unable to look in the mirror. I knew my eyes were swollen, not from tears, but from the humiliation that had been bottled up for years, now overflowing. Then I put on my shoes, grabbed my phone and wallet and shoved them into my coat pocket. No luggage, no clothes, no charger, just one decision. I was never coming back to this house. Not to the man who used to mean everything. Not to the mother-in-law who never saw me as human. Not to myself, the version of me that tolerated, endured, and placed hope where there should have been none. I walked out the door and into a new chapter, untitled, unplanned. But one thing I know for sure, they won't be in it. I don't remember how far I walked after leaving that apartment. All I know is that every step I took on that freezing sidewalk felt like it was cutting into my skin. Not because my shoes were too tight, but because I was walking without a destination, leaving behind a life I could no longer live without knowing where I was going next. In my coat pocket, I only had a phone, a wallet with a few crumpled bills, and a tiny life growing inside me. No jacket, no spare clothes, no plan, and most importantly, no one beside me. I wandered into a small coffee shop tucked away on a street corner I'd never noticed before, not because it was special, but because somehow my legs had chosen that place to stop. When my heart couldn't take another step, I sat there on a hard plastic chair and ordered the cheapest chai latte on the menu. The warm cup shook in my hands, not just from the cold, but from the slow realization that I had truly lost everything. Time passed in painful silence. I stayed for 3 hours, watching strangers come and go, watching the dim yellow lights reflect on the window, watching my own reflection in the blurry glass. A girl with no home to go back to, no one left to call my person. When I couldn't take it anymore, I called Sandy, the only friend who still picked up my calls. I had to hide in the bathroom, curl up in a corner just to cry without anyone seeing me. Sandy didn't ask questions. She just sighed and said, "Come stay with me, just for a while." And so I did, with nothing but empty hands, a bowed head, and a shame I couldn't name. Sandy's apartment was so small that every step felt like a collision. The ceiling hung low, and the air reeked of cigarette smoke and cat food in every corner. I slept on a mattress as thin as a sheet laid on the floor. Every morning, I woke up with a stiff neck from not having a pillow, nausea twisting my stomach, and my head spinning from a reality with no way out. But at least, it wasn't a park bench. It wasn't a concrete slab. It was a place to sleep, even if temporary. It was a roof. I tried my best not to be a burden, ate as little as I could, took the fastest showers, left no trace in Sandy's kitchen. But no matter how careful I was, I could see it in her eyes, the fatigue, every time she saw me sitting there, alone, quiet, useless. One morning, I overslept from sheer exhaustion, and Sandy, between a long yawn, muttered something that hurt more than anything Eric ever said. "You should stop acting like the world owes you something." I knew she didn't mean it that way, but it shattered me all the same. I hadn't just lost a boyfriend, or a place to live. I was slowly losing the only friend I had left. I stopped going on social media. I couldn't stand seeing mutual friends post pictures with Eric, or worse, reading Barb's cryptic status updates, "Real men know who's a burden." I scraped together the last of my change, went to a thrift store, and bought 2 t-shirts and a pair of jeans. Underwear? I washed them by hand in Sandy's bathroom sink every night, dried them with a tiny fan in the freezing dark. I shared Sandy's shampoo, her toothpaste, and prayed I wouldn't mess anything else up. Then, finally, a sliver of hope. A café in the neighborhood posted a job opening for a dishwasher. 5 a.m. start time. Low pay, cash only. I went to the interview in the same clothes I'd worn for 3 days straight, hair tied back, dark circles under my eyes. The owner was a woman named Vicky, maybe around 50, streaks of gray in her hair, eyes sharp but grounded. She looked me up and down, then simply said, 5 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. The work was hard. Grease got under my nails and wouldn't come out. I threw up twice on my first shift. But Vicky didn't scold me. She handed me a ginger candy and a mop. No questions, no pity, just reality. And I was grateful for that. From then on, I woke up every morning before dawn, walked nearly 2 kilometers to the cafe, scrubbed dishes, mopped floors, emptied trash, all for a few dollars and the dignity of still being able to do something. In the afternoons, I researched support programs for pregnant women. I looked up every free clinic, every aid application I could find. At night, I curled up on the floor, held my belly, and whispered to the baby, "I don't know where we're going, but I'm not giving up." I never called Eric, but he started calling. The first text was gentle. "Where are you?" Then, "My mom's trying to reach you." Then, "We need to talk." Then it became relentless. Dozens of calls every day, from his number, his friends, even his office line. I blocked them all. I wasn't the girl in the kitchen anymore, making breakfast full of hope. I was a mother, and my baby's future was my only priority. I could not let anyone drag me back into that pit again. I don't know what stopped me from giving up. Maybe it was that tiny heartbeat I heard during my first ultrasound at the free clinic. Maybe it was Vicky's blunt but brutally honest words. Your heart's still beating. Your kid's still alive. Keep thinking. Or maybe it was that one night. After throwing up my dinner from severe morning sickness, I curled up on the bathroom floor in Sandy's house, like a child, and realized no one's coming to save me. It's just me now, and I'm the only one left who can do anything for me. So, I started figuring out how to live again. Sandy and I began with a conversation that was simple but heavy. You know you can't stay here forever, right? I didn't say anything, not because I didn't know that, but because I'd known it from the moment I knocked on her door. But you also can't be pregnant and sleeping in a park. We sat down, opened up Sandy's old laptop, and searched shelters for pregnant women near me. That search led me to a place called Hope House, a transitional shelter for pregnant women and survivors of domestic violence. They only let you stay for up to 6 weeks, but in that time, they help with enrolling in welfare programs, finding long-term housing, prenatal care, and, most importantly, a safe place where you can lock the door at night. I called. They said there'd be a spot in 3 days. I said yes. No hesitation. Those 3 days were a race against myself. Sandy helped me fill out applications for Medicaid, WIC, SNAP, all things I used to think were for people worse off than me. But pride didn't matter anymore. Just survival. Vicky agreed to let me work a few light shifts in those last 3 days before I moved out. I was still exhausted, but she always made sure I ate something between shifts. On the night I left, she pressed a plastic container of hot soup into my hands. Take it. No guarantee the new place has food ready. The shelter was a renovated home tucked deep in an old residential neighborhood. From the outside, it looked like any other house. But inside, it was a whole different world. Surveillance cameras, keypad doors, rules taped to every wall. No male visitors, no coming back after 9 p.m. They called my name and brought me to the second floor. My room wasn't really a room, just a partition with a twin bed and a small dresser. I would be sharing a bathroom with 3 other women. But I didn't care, because for the first time in weeks, I had a door I could lock. I could close my eyes and not be afraid. That first morning, I couldn't eat the free breakfast they offered. My body still felt numb. But then Evelyn, the shelter manager, an older woman with a raspy voice and eyes that had clearly seen things, sat down next to me in the kitchen. She slid a folder across the table. These are programs for you. You've got 6 weeks here. Use them well. Inside, a list of free prenatal clinics, parenting classes at the community center, resources for long-term housing. I had never seen so much help on one list, and never felt like I needed every single thing on it so badly. I scheduled my first real prenatal visit, the kind where they actually show you an image of your baby. It looked like a little bean with a flickering heartbeat. 10 weeks old. Still too early to see much. But I couldn't stop crying when I heard that heartbeat. I'm sorry I couldn't give you a better start, I whispered in my mind. But I'm going to try my best. From now on. Well, I got a new job at a grocery store. Early shift, 4 to 8 a.m., stocking shelves. It wasn't easy, but it paid better than dishwashing. After that, I'd go back to the shelter, shower, eat something fast, then head out to work the evening shift at Vicky's café if she had hours for me. And so every day passed in aching steps, swollen feet, a back that felt broken. But I knew I was moving forward, inch by inch. I called it intentional survival. Eric kept trying to reach me through unknown numbers, mutual friends, even sending flowers to my job. Vicky tossed them in the trash without blinking and said, "Dishes ain't even done, no time for romance, trash." I didn't answer any of his messages. But deep inside, I started to feel less angry. Not forgiveness, just learning to keep him outside the new life I was building. 2 weeks later, I got news. I'd been accepted into a transitional housing program. Affordable apartments for women like me, rent based on income. I applied immediately, interviewed, wrote a letter of intent, and waited. Then, one afternoon while I was wiping dishes at the cafe, my phone rang. "You've been accepted. You can move in next week." I broke down crying on the spot. Vicky didn't ask why. She just handed me a dish towel and said, "Cry quick and finish those bowls." That night I called Sandy. I called my mom, who had just started sending me small grocery money each week. And for the first time, in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a mother preparing a home for her child. I moved into the tiny transitional housing apartment exactly 1 week after the phone call came. 1 room, a small kitchenette in the corner, a cramped bathroom, and a window facing a dull gray brick wall. But when I closed that door, for the first time in months, I could finally exhale, deeply. I sank to the floor and looked around. There was nothing here, just a metal bed frame with a thin white sheet. No chairs, no dining table, no fridge. But it was mine. No one else had a spare key, no Barb, no Eric, no cigarette stench clinging to my clothes. I used to think I was in a stable relationship. But it wasn't until I was in this empty space that I realized I was finally safe. I called my mother. She didn't cheer, didn't cry like they do in the movies. She simply said something I had dreamed of hearing. "I'm proud of you." That night, I scrubbed the floor with an old towel and placed my bag of clothes and the small box with my daughter's ultrasound in the corner of the table. A fragile little nest, but a kind beginning. Time moved faster than I thought. My belly grew by the day. The first time I felt her move inside me, I was stunned. Not from fear, but from the raw truth that life was really happening. I went to my prenatal checkups at the community clinic. The doctors there never asked too much. They just noted things down, did ultrasounds, checked the heartbeat, and said, "Everything looks fine." Every time I walked out with that blurry black and white photo of my baby, I stopped at the discount grocery store to pick up a few things. Prenatal milk, ginger cookies, a $2 Stretch Mark cream. Small stuff, but I'd whisper to my baby, "I don't have much, but I have you, and I won't let you go without." I kept working 2 jobs, morning shifts at the supermarket, evenings at Vicky's diner. Vicky never said much, but she always packed up leftover soup and shoved it into my bag. "Take it. If you don't eat enough, I'll give you hell." Whenever I slumped over from exhaustion during a shift, she'd toss me a pillow for the wooden chair. No questions, just the kind of care that comes from someone who's been through things. At the transitional housing complex, I started to meet others, mostly women who had survived abuse. A few were pregnant, like me. There was Lydia, 3 units down, with a 2-year-old. One day, she saw me struggling with my laundry basket and just grabbed it without saying a word. Then she said, "Next time, call me. If you fall, I'll be pissed." From that day on, she became my first real friend since I left Eric. Lydia never asked about my past. We talked like women who truly understood what it meant to lose and what it meant to rise again. By my 7th month, I was running on empty. The back pain was brutal, my legs swollen. Breathing became short. I had to quit my supermarket job. I simply couldn't stand for 4 hours anymore. Money got tight. I began measuring every cent. Pads or milk, another box of cereal, or save it in case the baby got a fever. But I didn't ask Eric for anything. No calls, no texts. I didn't reopen Facebook. I still owed myself one final act of dignity. I saw him again, just once, at a coffee shop. I came early, picked a corner table. He showed up looking hollowed out, thin, sunken eyes. When he saw the ultrasound, his eyes welled up. I asked, "Do you remember what you said that morning?" He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I really meant it back then. But I was wrong. So wrong. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just said, "You won't be there when she's born. But if you want to be a father someday, do it the right way, with the right boundaries." Then I left. As my due date drew closer, I panicked. Not from fear of Eric, but from fear of not being good enough as a mother. Lydia gave me a small foldable crib. A support group dropped off diapers, bottles, towels. A stranger from the nearby church handed me a bag of baby toys with a handwritten note, "You don't have to be perfect to be a mother. Just love fully." I held onto that like a new kind of truth. Being a mom isn't about having enough money. It's about having enough courage to keep going. I still sleep little, eat poorly, worry every night when the baby kicks less than usual. But I never feel ashamed of being poor. I only know this. I'm trying, every single day, for a life I chose to carry, despite every judgment. And that's how I kept my dignity. Not with confidence, but with resolve. I'm not the perfect mother, but I am a real one. I gave birth on a cold, gray morning, when spring was only just peeking in through the window and my life still felt like a rough draft, unfinished and uncertain. I didn't have a detailed birth plan. No man to wipe my sweat, no one there to snap a photo when my baby cried for the very first time, but I had Lydia, my friend, who rushed me to the hospital when my water broke right in the middle of a cafe. I had Vicky, the grumpy old cafe owner, who was the first to shout, "Whoever broke the water better get her to the hospital now." And more than anything, I had the strongest reason of all to walk into that delivery room, my daughter. A little soul I chose to keep with every ounce of strength I had. She was born after 22 hours of labor. So tiny. Eyes shut. Jet black hair. Her little hand wrapped tightly around my finger like she'd known me forever. When the doctor laid her on my chest, I didn't cry. I just let out a sigh. The deepest, fullest breath I'd ever taken, as if I'd carried months of fear, loneliness, and pain, and finally let them all go with the soft, broken sobs of this brand new life. I named her Lily Grace, without Eric's last name. No other name could ever replace it. That name was something I had protected with my own blood, tears, and dignity. My parents came to visit the day after I returned to my tiny apartment. Mom brought food, burp cloths, and a few hand-me-down baby things from the neighbors. Dad sat awkwardly at the edge of the couch, unsure how to hold Lily, until she let out a little yawn, and he burst out laughing. I hadn't seen that laugh on his face before, maybe not since I was in elementary school. A few days later, before they left, Dad pulled me aside. He held my hand and said, "We've got an empty guest house back home. If you want to move in, we'll rent it to you for next to nothing, just enough to cover taxes. You'll have a yard for Lily to run around in, good neighbors, some stability." I hesitated, but in his eyes, I didn't see pressure. I saw a father quietly trying to make things right after years of silence. I nodded, agreed to move when Lily turned 2 months old. Time passed in the blink of an eye. I returned to light shifts at the cafe. Lydia watched Lily in the mornings. At night, I learned how to rock her to sleep. Learned the difference between a hungry cry and a wet diaper cry. Learned to believe that I was actually doing the impossible. Being a mom. One afternoon, I was sitting in the soft sunlight of a park near home. Lily was fast asleep in my arms, her cheeks rising and falling like she was dreaming. My phone buzzed. A message from Eric. I know I can't change the past, but if you'll let me, I still want to be part of Lily's future. Even if it's just from a distance, I'd still like to be called Dad. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there, watching the leaves drift gently, as if trying not to disturb the peace. A few days later, I agreed to meet him, at a different cafe, far from the one we used to share. Eric showed up looking different. No desperation, no flowers, no apology letters. Just a quiet man sitting across from me, hands on the table, saying, "I'm beginning to understand. Being a father doesn't come from DNA. It comes from responsibility, and I'm ready to start over. Not with you, but with her." We set terms. He could visit on weekends, 2 hours. No taking her far, no appearances with his mother, and no one tells her what to call him until she chooses for herself. He agreed. No argument. 2 months later, Lily and I moved into my parents' little house back in the countryside. Just 2 bedrooms, an old kitchen with a leaky sink, but a sunny yard where I could lay out a mat and let her gaze at the clouds. Dad rebuilt the old swing in the backyard. Mom made fish porridge every afternoon. We weren't fully healed, but we were learning, together, how to be a family. Not perfect, but enough to never feel alone again. Every night when Lily sleeps on my chest, her tiny hand reaching toward the air like she's dreaming of angels, I think about that fateful morning. The one where I stood in the kitchen holding a pregnancy test, thinking I was about to start a new chapter with the man I loved. Who would have guessed? That moment was the beginning of a whole new chapter with myself. I still don't have my dream job. Still don't have much money. Still have days I cry from exhaustion, nights I break down holding my daughter in the dark. But every time I look at Lily, I see one thing no one can ever deny. She is the result of the bravest choice I've ever made. And if someone were to ask me, If you could go back to that day, would you still keep that baby? I'd smile and say, not just keep her, but hold on tight.